You're in the car, engine already off. There's a message on your phone you read 3 hours ago, and you are not answering it tonight. Nobody yelled. Nothing happened, technically. In a minute, you'll go inside, say hey, and tell somebody you're just tired, which is true, the way a receipt is true. You didn't go quiet because you stopped feeling it. You went quiet because you're feeling it. So why is that still the first thing you do at your age after everything it's already cost you? The answer starts a lot further back than you'd think. I'm Daniel Rivera, I'm 56, and what I do here is take the things our generation gets criticized for and trace them back to where they actually came from. Not to excuse them, to make them make sense. If that's your kind of thing, subscribe. That's the whole pitch. Now back to you, because I want you to notice how good you've gotten at that 90 seconds in the car. The garage light is on a timer. You know exactly when it's going to click off, and you're going to let it. Inside the house, everything is fine. Nobody's fighting, nobody's waiting to corner you. And that's almost the strange part, because something landed on you today, or last week, or 3 Sundays ago at a table full of people who love you, and it hasn't moved since. You're not going to answer that message. Not because you're plotting anything, not because you want them to sit in it. You just don't have what a good answer would require tonight. And you'd rather send nothing than send something short and cold that you'd have to apologize for on Thursday. So you sit. Then you go in, and you eat, and somebody asks if you're okay, and you say, yeah, long day. A receipt tells you the total. It doesn't tell you what you bought. And I want to be precise about what we're actually talking about here, because it isn't shyness. Some people are quiet all the time. That's temperament, and it isn't this. What we're describing is much more specific. You're a functional, verbal, competent adult who talks all day. At work, on the phone, in the meeting where you're the one who explains what everyone else meant. And then something wounds you, and a door closes so fast and so smoothly that even you barely hear the latch. You don't slam anything. That's key. You get polite, you get shorter. You answer questions, but you stop offering. You still show up, still do the thing you said you'd do, still drive the person to the appointment. You just stop narrating your own interior, and you do it so seamlessly that the other person often has no idea anything changed for about 3 weeks. And then, quietly without announcing it, you withdraw investment. You call a little less. You don't mention the good news right away. You stop being the one who reaches out first, not as punishment. It genuinely doesn't feel like punishment from the inside. It feels like conservation. Now, where did that come from? There's an easy answer available, and it's the one I want to skip past, because it's the one every video like this reaches for. The easy answer is, your parents were emotionally unavailable and you were traumatized. Sometimes that's true. Often it's a cartoon. And I've noticed that for a lot of people in our generation, especially in families that came from somewhere else, or worked in ways that left no margin, that explanation actually makes them more defensive, not less, because it asks them to convict people who were doing their best with a set of tools nobody handed them. So let's go at it differently, and let's go in layers, because I don't think there's one origin. I think there are about 3, and they stack. The first one is structural, and it's generational, and it's almost boring in how ordinary it was. A lot of us grew up with more unsupervised time than kids get now. Not because anybody was neglecting us, quite because the adults were working, and the assumption of the era was that a kid could handle a few hours. Maybe you had a key on a shoelace. Maybe you had a phone number written on the inside of a cabinet door for emergencies, and a private understanding of what counted as an emergency. It was not a scraped knee, it was not a kid on the bus saying something that stayed with you for 11 years. Nobody sat you down and explained the policy. You worked it out on your own, you handle it yourself, and you only escalate if it's bleeding. That's a real skill. It's why you can walk into a chaotic situation at 55 and be the calmest person in the room. But it comes with a lesson attached. If small pain doesn't get reported, small pain doesn't get processed. You never built that muscle because there was no occasion to. The muscle you built instead was tolerance. And everybody around you started treating that as information about who you are, rather than what you were doing. The second layer is family. And it's where this gets more specific for a lot of you. In plenty of households, and I want to be careful here, because there is no single Latino family, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. But in plenty of households, there was an understanding that what happens in the house stays in the house. Not stated as a rule, just enforced by atmosphere. You don't air it, you don't embarrass the family. You don't hand outsiders a reason to look down on you because outsiders were already looking. And there was often a second thing layered on top of that, which is harder to talk about because it comes from love. If you grew up watching a parent who worked doubles, or who left a country, or who buried something in another place and never once brought it up at dinner, then your own hurt arrived pre-measured against theirs. And it came up short. Every time. Nobody had to tell you your problem wasn't serious. You could do the math yourself at 9 years old, and you decided it wasn't worth mentioning. Which is, if you think about it, a remarkable act of consideration from a child. It's also the exact moment a lot of people stopped keeping a record of what hurt them. The third layer doesn't apply to everyone, and if it doesn't apply to you, let it go by. But if it does, it may be the biggest one. Some of you were the bridge, the translator, the one holding the phone with the cord stretched into the hallway, on hold with the electric company, while a parent stood 2 feet away watching your face for the verdict. The one who opened the envelope from the school, the bank, the insurance company, read it twice, and then decided, in real time at 14, how much of it to say out loud in the other room. You sat in the exam room and turned a doctor's sentence into something survivable. Sometimes you delivered the bad news yourself, in a language you'd had to shift into, to people who were counting on you to get it right. Here's what that does. If you are the channel through which difficult information travels, you learn to absorb, not to emit. The whole system depends on you staying steady. An interpreter who breaks down is not an interpreter anymore, and everyone in that room can feel it. So you develop a kind of professional composure at an age when you should have been worried about a bike. And the thing that gets built out of all 3 layers is not damage. I want to be very clear about that because a lot of people will tell you that your silence is a wound, and I think that's wrong, or at least lazy. What got built is a competence. You became the person who does not make a scene, who does not lose it in the meeting, who holds it until Saturday, who processes things internally and comes back with a decision instead of a mess. That kept jobs. That kept marriages together through years that would have taken other people apart. That lets you sit across from a boss or an institution or a parent in a conversation you could not win, and hold on to the only territory that was still yours, which was your own face. Silence when you can't win is dignity. Anybody who's ever been talked down to in a meeting by someone half their age with a quarter of their experience, someone who says circle back without irony, knows exactly what I mean. You don't argue. You just go somewhere they can't follow. So no, it wasn't a defect. It was a very good tool used correctly for about 30 years, which is exactly why nobody warns you about what happens next. Nobody flags a strategy that's working. There's no annual review where somebody tells you your best quality has started charging interest. Because tools have operating conditions, and yours changed without a memo. There are 3 costs, and they don't arrive together. They arrive in order, and the third one is the reason I wanted to make this particular video. Start with the first, because it's the one you can actually observe if you look for it. People stopped asking twice. Think about the last time someone asked if you were okay. Did they ask once except, yeah, I'm good, and move on? They probably did. And you may have felt a flicker of something about that. A small, unfair, entirely human flicker of that's it? That's all you've got? But run it back. How many times, over how many years did that person ask and get nothing, and eventually learn that asking twice was intrusive or embarrassing or just useless? Because they did learn it. You taught them. Not on purpose, and not in one conversation, but through a few hundred small moments where the honest answer was available and you handed over the receipt instead. That's the uncomfortable part of this, and I'd rather say it plainly than tiptoe around it. Some of the loneliness you feel now is the correct and predictable result of a strategy that used to protect you. It's not a betrayal by the people around you. It's a system working exactly as designed, 20 years after the design stopped serving you. And I'm not going to turn that into an accusation because there's a version of this where you're not lonely at all, and that version is real too. The CDC makes a distinction here that's worth stealing. In their public health work on connection, not about our generation specifically, about adults generally, they keep 2 things apart that we tend to mash together. There's isolation, which is a count, how many people you actually see and talk to. And there's loneliness, which is a gap, the distance between the connection you have and the connection you want. Related, obviously, but not the same measurement, and they're separated for a reason. But the distinction matters for us because a lot of people watching this are going to hear you've isolated yourself and think, no, I like my life. My house is quiet and it's mine. I have 2 people I'd call at 2 a.m., and I don't need 11. I don't want the drama or the obligation to have an opinion about everything. If that's you, good. Genuinely, that's not a symptom. Peace is a legitimate destination, and you got there on purpose. The question I'd offer isn't whether you like the quiet. It's a narrower one. When something hurts, is the quiet still a choice, or is it just what happens? Because those are 2 different situations wearing the same clothes. One of them is a life you built. The other is a reflex you inherited. Which brings me to the second cost, and this one is going to sting a little. And I'd ask you to stay with me through it, because I don't think it makes you a bad person. I think it makes you an extremely normal one. At some point, the silence stopped being only protection and started functioning as a test. Here's what I mean. When you go quiet, some part of you is watching. Not consciously, not with a scorecard, but watching. Does anyone notice? Does anyone come find me? Who calls? Who doesn't? Who reads the shorter text and says, hey, something's off with you? And the people in your life keep failing an exam they don't know is being administered. That's what turns a defense into a slow leak. Because now you have evidence. Now you can say, with real data behind it, see, nobody actually checks on me. And that evidence makes you a little quieter next time, which produces more evidence, which makes you quieter still. It's a closed loop, and it's airtight. And it's hard to break because from inside it, it just looks like the truth. I've watched people spend 15 years in that loop. Not dramatic years, and perfectly pleasant ones full of dinners and birthdays and helping people move. Just 15 years of gradually reducing the amount of yourself in the room while calling it keeping the peace. And the third cost is the one about time. And it's the reason I wanted to make this particular video. When you're 30 and you pull back from someone, it's a pause. People chase you a little at 30. There's more life in front of everyone. More occasions. More chances to run into each other and repair it sideways without ever discussing it. At 55, a pause is not a pause. At 55, if you go quiet on a brother, a friend, an adult kid, the relationship can just stay there. Nobody comes to get you, not because they don't love you, because they're also 50-something, also carrying a parent and a job and a body that's started sending them memos, and they have learned to respect your distance because you asked them to, over and over, without words. Withdrawal used to be reversible. Now, it has a way of becoming permanent by default, and I don't think most of us have updated our internal math on that, especially if you're in the middle of the two-directional squeeze, which a lot of you are. The AARP and the National Alliance for Caregiving found in their 2025 report that roughly 1 in 4 U.S. adults is a family caregiver, and among Latino caregivers, about 43% are also raising someone under 18. That's a Latino figure, not a Gen X figure, unless it doesn't isolate our age group. But it points at a real structure, a large number of people doing care in both directions at once. And if you're that person, silence isn't just a habit, it's practical. Who exactly are you supposed to tell? The parent you're caring for? The kid who's stressed enough already? The sibling who does less and you've decided not to fight about it? There's no room in the schedule for your own bad week, so it gets filed. There's a qualitative study I keep coming back to. Mendez Luck and colleagues, 2016, interviews with 44 Mexican origin caregivers. Small sample, one origin group, and it can't tell you how common anything is. What it can do is show a mechanism. The ideal of the family that shows up for each other can coexist with very little actual support arriving, and with the practical work concentrated on 1 or 2 people. Sit with that for a second. The belief that family takes care of family can be completely sincere and completely operative. And still in practice, one person is doing it. And that person is often the one who never said it was too much, because saying so would sound like an accusation against people they love. So the silence isn't only about pain. Sometimes it's about protecting an idea of the family that you want to keep believing in. Alright, here's where I think the whole thing turns over, and it's not what I expected when I started pulling on this. We've been calling it silence this entire time. I don't think that's accurate. Your quiet was never an absence of communication. It was a message. It's probably the most honest thing you've ever sent anyone. Going still, getting polite, pulling back, that's not you saying nothing. That's you saying something happened to me and I don't have a safe way to hand it to you. The problem is that you wrote it in a language you never taught anybody to read. And then, and this is the part I'd want someone to say to me, you spent 30 years quietly resenting people for not being fluent in it. That's not cruelty on your part. It's the most understandable mistake in the world because from the inside, your silence is loud. It's deafening. You can hear the whole story in it. Every detail of what happened and why it hurt and what they should have done differently. It's all right there, obvious, blaring. Of course they can tell. How could they not tell? They can't tell. They're getting a man who seems a little tired. That's the entire transmission on their end. And here's what turns that from sad into something almost tender. You didn't go quiet to hurt them. You went quiet to spare them. Every single time. You looked at the people around you, made a fast calculation about what they could carry, decided they had enough, and took your thing off the table. That's what the silence has always been. Care delivered in a format nobody can open. Which means the story you may have been telling yourself, that you're a closed-off person, that something in you is broken or cold, is wrong. Not softened, not reframed. Wrong. You're not a person who doesn't feel things. You're a person who learned very early that your own pain was the one thing capable of bringing down a system you were responsible for holding up, and who acted accordingly for 4 decades with almost no exceptions. That's not coldness. That's the most consistent act of consideration in your entire life. It just happens to have a bill attached, and the bill comes due right about now. So what do you do with that? And here's where I'm going to disappoint anybody expecting a program, because I don't think you need one, and I don't think you'd follow it if I gave you one. I'm not going to tell you to open up. That advice is useless for people like us. Be vulnerable is a sentence that means nothing at 56. It's a slogan on a coffee mug. It's a mandatory wellness webinar you attended with your camera off. And every one of us has already sat through some version of it, nodded, and changed exactly nothing. Here's the smaller thing, and it's the only thing I'd actually suggest. Pick one person. One. Not a circle, not a group, not a whole new approach to relationships. One person who has earned it. And you know who that is? You've known the whole time you've been listening to this. And the next time something lands on you, instead of the full explanation you don't want to give, try one short sentence in real time. Not a confession, not a breakdown. Just, that landed harder than I expected. Or, I'm quiet tonight and it's not about you. Or, I need a day and I'll come back. That's it. 6 words, 10 words. No feelings inventory, no processing. Because the goal isn't to turn into someone who talks about their feelings for a living. You're not going to become that, and honestly, I don't think you should. The goal is much smaller and much more useful. Stop making the people who love you guess. Guessing is what they've been doing for years, and they've been guessing wrong. And you've been keeping score on a test they were never handed. One sentence turns the silence from a message nobody can read into a message with one line of translation attached. That's the entire adjustment. Everything else you already know how to do. And listen, you might decide not to. That's real, and it's allowed. Maybe you've looked at all this and concluded that the quiet has served you well enough, that the trade is fair, that you'd rather have your peace than the risk. That's a decision, and it's yours to make. The only thing I'd ask is that it be a decision made now by the person you are today, instead of a rule set by a 14-year-old standing in a kitchen doing math about whose problem was bigger, who came up with the wrong answer. That kid was being kind. They just didn't have all the information. So, the car in the driveway. Engine off, light on the timer, phone in your hand with a message you already read. You're going to sit there tonight either way. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, and I don't think 90 seconds in a quiet car is a problem that needs solving. That car is probably the only room in your life where nobody needs anything from you. But the silence in it isn't empty anymore, and it never was. Something is being said in there. It's been getting said in that exact spot for years. The only question left is whether one person out there ever gets to hear it. Now, I want to hear from you, and I'm going to ask you something specific rather than something general, because the general version never gets a real answer. When did you first learn that going quiet was safer than saying it out loud? Not the general feeling and the moment. How old were you, where were you, and what happened right before you decided not to say anything? Some of you are going to know the exact age. Some of you are going to realize you can't remember a time before it, which is its own kind of answer. Put it in the comments. I read them, and they shape what I make next. A lot of what's in this video came from things people told me down there. And there's a second half to this that we didn't get to today because it's a different animal. We talked about what happens when you go quiet. But some of you grew up next to someone who did exactly this. A father, a mother, an older brother who went still for a week and nobody ever explained why. And you learned to read the temperature of a room before you took your coat off. That skill got you through your whole life. It's also the reason you can't relax in a house where everything is fine. That's the one I want to do next. If this one explains something about how you handle being hurt, that one might explain something about how you handle everyone else. I'll see you there.